My wife stood up in the middle of our 10th anniversary dinner, raised her wine glass, and said, "I think it's finally time everyone knew the truth." The entire restaurant went silent. Not the polite anticipatory silence of a room waiting for a toast. The airless, confused silence of 20 people who have just felt the temperature in a room drop several degrees without understanding why. Then she looked directly at me, and she smiled. Not a warm smile. Not the smile I had fallen in love with 12 years ago. Not anything that resembled the woman I thought I knew. The kind of smile you give someone right before you destroy them. "I never loved you." A few people gasped. My mother dropped her fork, the sound of it hitting the plate cutting through the silence like a small, sharp explosion. My brother actually rose halfway from his chair as if his body had responded before his mind could process what his ears had just heard. And Emily continued, steady, composed, as if she had rehearsed this. "I only married you because you were safe, that's it." I didn't say a word. I sat there and I stared at her, at this woman I had given 12 years of my life to, and I felt something move through me that I could not immediately name. Then I placed my napkin quietly on the table, stood up, and walked out. No argument, no scene, no dramatic response that would give her the satisfaction of watching me fall apart in public. I simply left, and what happened in the 3 hours that followed completely changed everything. Because a message arrived from her sister, a short, precise, devastating message. And after reading it, I understood that what Emily had said at that dinner table was not the worst of what she had been hiding, not even close. Welcome to Chronicles, where we bring you the most emotional, raw, and real stories of betrayal, survival, and the kind of justice that arrives not through revenge, but through truth. If you believe that the people who weaponize your trust, drain your accounts, and perform cruelty in front of the people you love deserve to face every consequence of those choices, hit that like button right now. Subscribe, turn on notifications. We are here every single week, and I promise you, you do not want to miss what is coming. Settle in. This is a true life story. I am 38 years old. My wife, Emily, was 36. We had been together for almost 12 years and married for 10. A relationship that had begun when we were both still figuring out who we were. Young enough to be optimistic, old enough to mean the commitments we made, at least. I thought we were happy. We owned a small house in a neighborhood we had chosen together, walking through open homes on Saturday mornings with coffee cups in our hands and opinions about kitchen layouts that felt, at the time, like intimacy. We had decent careers, not spectacular, not the kind that generate envy, but solid. We had been trying for children, unsuccessfully, but without despair. We had a life that the people around us would have described as stable, predictable, safe. Looking back now, I understand that safe was precisely the word Emily had decided to resent. Over the year before that anniversary dinner, she had become different. Not dramatically, not in the sudden, obvious way of a person whose behavior has fundamentally changed overnight. In the gradual way, the subtle, incremental way of someone who is slowly withdrawing from a situation they have already mentally left. Less affection, more criticism. The warmth that had always been present in even our ordinary exchanges. The morning coffee passed across the counter. The brief touch on the arm when passing in a hallway had receded into something more procedural. More late nights at work. More weekends where she needed space, a word she had begun using with increasing frequency, as if the house we shared had somehow become smaller without my noticing. Every time I asked if something was wrong, she said everything was fine. I believed her, because that is what people do when they trust someone. They believe them, even when, especially when, they shouldn't. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration, 10 years of marriage, a milestone. The kind of occasion that justifies a reservation at a restaurant nicer than your usual Friday night and the gathering of the people who have been present across the entire arc of the relationship. My parents were there, her parents, close friends, coworkers who had become something more than professional acquaintances over the years, and her younger sister, Megan, a woman I had always liked, who had always been warm to me in a way that felt genuine rather than performed. 20 people, good wine, the comfortable noise of a table full of people who are genuinely happy to be together. The night started perfectly. Laughter. Stories from the early years that everyone had heard before but still found funny. The particular warmth of a gathering where nobody is performing, where people are simply present with each other. And then Emily stood up. I assumed in the first half second that she was giving a toast. It was the natural assumption. An anniversary dinner. A wife rising from her chair with a wine glass in her hand. What else would it be? What it was, I was about to find out, was something she had been planning for considerably longer than that evening. She spoke with the composure of a woman who is not afraid of the words coming out of her mouth. She talked about feeling trapped, about having settled, about the life she had wanted that had somehow been replaced by the life she was actually living. And then, looking directly at me across a table full of the people we had built our life among, "If I could go back and do it all again, I wouldn't choose you." The silence that followed was the longest I have ever sat inside. I looked around the table, my mother's face, my brother's face, the faces of friends who had been at our wedding, who had celebrated with us, who had believed in us. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew where to look. So I looked at Emily one final time, And then I stood up, folded my napkin, placed it on my plate, and walked out of that restaurant with every shred of composure I had left. No argument, no tears, no dramatic final words. Just the sound of my footsteps across the floor and the door closing behind me. I drove for a while without any particular destination. The kind of driving you do when your body needs to be moving because standing still is not an option. When the physical act of forward motion is the only thing that feels remotely manageable. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Megan, Emily's younger sister. 5 words. Do you know why she really did that tonight? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, no. Her response was immediate, because she thought she'd already won. My stomach dropped. I pulled over, called her. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been sitting with her phone in her hand, waiting for exactly this call. And what she told me over the next 40 minutes did not just explain that evening. It restructured everything I thought I understood about the previous year of my life. Stay with me, because what I am about to tell you is the part of this story that changes everything. According to Megan, Emily had been planning to leave me for months. Not because she had fallen out of love. Not because our marriage had failed in any of the ordinary human ways that marriages sometimes fail. Because she believed she was about to become wealthy. Several months earlier, Emily had learned that her grandmother's estate was finally being settled after years of legal complexity. The family understood there was a significant inheritance coming, very significant, the kind of number that changes the trajectory of a life. Emily became consumed by it. She started talking about properties she wanted to see, about travel, about starting over in a new city, a new life, a new version of herself that did not include the safe, stable, predictable existence she had spent the last decade constructing with me. And then there was someone else, a man named Ryan, a real estate developer she had met almost a year earlier through professional channels. Megan had suspected something was happening between them for months. The specific suspicion of a younger sister who pays attention and knows her siblings' behavior well enough to recognize when something has fundamentally shifted. She had never had proof until that night. Apparently, Emily had spent half of our anniversary dinner texting him. And after I walked out, in front of the remaining guests, the friends and family who had come to celebrate our marriage, she openly told several people that she wouldn't need much longer. She believed her future was already secured. She believed she was days away from stepping out of one life and into another one she had already furnished in her imagination. She was wrong, but I did not know that yet. What I knew that night, sitting in a parked car with my phone pressed to my ear, was that the woman I had been married to for 10 years was not the person I thought I knew, and Megan was not finished. The following morning I began going through our financial records, not to build a case, not out of strategic calculation, simply because I needed answers, the specific factual documented kind that cannot be reframed or explained away with a tone of voice or a well-constructed excuse. What I found stunned me. Over the previous 8 months, money had been leaving our joint savings account in amounts carefully sized to avoid immediate attention. $500, $800, $1,000. Occasional larger withdrawals spaced far enough apart to maintain the appearance of ordinary fluctuation. When I added it together, nearly $23,000. Gone. I took screenshots, downloaded statements going back 18 months, saved everything in a folder with timestamps and account references. The kind of documentation that does not require interpretation. It simply exists, factual and complete. Then I noticed the other pattern. Hotel charges in cities she had claimed to be visiting for work. Restaurant charges at times she had been unreachable. Weekend expenses during periods she had described as conferences or team retreats or any of the other categories of explanation that I had accepted without question because I trusted her. Every late meeting suddenly made sense. Every canceled plan, every excuse that had felt slightly too smooth, slightly too prepared. All of it assembled itself in front of me with the cold, clarifying efficiency of evidence that has simply been waiting for someone to look. 2 days after the anniversary dinner, Emily came home. She walked in looking irritated, not guilty, not remorseful, not carrying any of the visible weight of someone who has done something they understand to be wrong. Just irritated in the specific way of a person who has decided they are being unfairly inconvenienced. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Bank statements spread across it in organized chronological order. She froze, then her expression shifted, not into shame but into something closer to calculation. The rapid, visible assessment of a person determining how to respond to a situation they had not expected to face yet. You went through our finances? Where's the money, Emily? A pause. And then, this is the moment I've replayed more times than I can count. She laughed, not nervously, not the uncomfortable laugh of someone buying time. She genuinely laughed. As if I had asked her something she found mildly amusing. I was going to tell you eventually. Eventually, as if $23,000 was a delayed disclosure rather than theft. As if the appropriate response to discovering your savings have been systematically drained over 8 months is to appreciate the intention to inform you at some unspecified future point. And then she told me, the affair, the money, Ryan, the plans she had been building in the shadow of our marriage, all of it, or so I believed. Because then she said something that did not fit the shape of everything else she had just confessed. She looked at me with an expression I could not quite read and said, "It won't matter soon anyway." I did not understand what she meant. I was about to find out. 3 days after that kitchen table conversation, the inheritance decision became official. Emily received exactly zero. Nothing. Not a reduced amount. Not a smaller share than she had hoped for. Absolutely nothing. Her grandmother, in the months before her death, had become aware of something that had apparently deeply troubled her, the degree to which certain members of her family were already positioning themselves around her estate. The conversations happening before she was even gone, the calculations being made while she was still present. She had found it repugnant, so she had changed her will, quietly, completely. Every cent redirected to charitable organizations she had supported throughout her life. An act, according to the attorney who administered the estate, that she had described as giving her money to people who had earned it rather than those who had simply been waiting for it. The moment Emily received this information, the entire architecture of her plan collapsed, because every decision she had made over the previous year, the withdrawal from our marriage, the financial transfers, the affair with Ryan, the performance at that anniversary dinner, had been built on a foundation that no longer existed. And Ryan? His behavior changed with a speed that, in retrospect, should have been entirely predictable. He became difficult to reach, then unavailable. Then, within 2 weeks of the inheritance news, completely and utterly gone. Funny how quickly certain relationships disappear when the financial landscape shifts. I thought the story was complete. It was not. A week later, my phone rang. A woman's voice I did not recognize introduced herself as Ryan's ex-wife. She had heard about what happened, the anniversary dinner, the affair, the collapsed inheritance, through the particular, efficient channels through which information moves in interconnected social circles. And she wanted me to know something. Ryan had done this before, not once, not twice, multiple times across multiple years. He identified women he had reason to believe had access to significant money, inheritance, divorce settlements, family wealth. He entered their lives with charm and consistency and the appearance of genuine emotional investment. He made promises that were calibrated precisely to what each woman most wanted to hear. And then, when the circumstances stopped benefiting him, he was simply no longer there. Emily was not special to him. She was not different. She was not the woman who had finally changed him or reached him in ways his previous relationships had not. She was the latest entry in a pattern. She had left a 10-year marriage, had publicly humiliated her husband, drained their savings, planned an exit, for a man who had never had any genuine intention toward her. Ironically, she had become exactly what she had spent years telling herself she was escaping, someone else's backup plan. Over the months that followed, everything that Emily had constructed came apart. She moved into an apartment she had not budgeted for, one that strained her income in ways she had not anticipated because her financial planning had assumed a foundation of inherited wealth that no longer existed. Several friends stopped speaking to her, not dramatically, not with confrontations or public statements, but in the quiet, irreversible way of people who have reassessed a relationship and found the math no longer working. Her parents were devastated. Her mother, who had been at that anniversary dinner and had heard every word of that speech, could not find a framework for defending what had happened. Her father told her, with the blunt honesty of a man who had run out of patience, that she had dismantled her own life with her own choices and that the consequences were hers to carry. And I focused on rebuilding therapy work, the relationships, with family, with genuine friends, that I had allowed to recede while pouring energy into a marriage that only one of us was actually committed to. Slowly, with the unglamorous incremental progress that real recovery requires, things got better. About 8 months after the anniversary dinner, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. From Emily. I held it for a moment before deciding to read it. It was shorter than I expected. She was not asking for money. She was not asking to reconcile. She was not offering the kind of explanation that asked to be accepted as a reason rather than recognized as a justification. She was apologizing, and for the first time in my experience of her, it felt like something real. She admitted in writing what I had already begun to understand from Megan and from the months of reflection that followed that evening. The anniversary speech had been planned, not impulsive, not the uncalculated spillover of genuine emotion planned. She had wanted to humiliate me publicly. She had wanted everyone who mattered to both of us to witness her leaving as an act of choice rather than recognize it as what it actually was, an act of greed and miscalculation that had cost her everything. She needed the narrative to belong to her. But after losing everything she had staked that narrative on, she had been left alone with the version of events that was simply and unavoidably true. She had not ruined my life, she had ruined her own. I did not respond to the letter, not out of anger, not out of the desire to deliver a final verdict. There was simply genuinely nothing left to say. A year after that Thursday night in the restaurant, I sold the house, moved closer to my family, started a new position, built friendships that had the particular, tested quality of relationships formed after a person has been through something that revealed exactly who they are. And eventually, not quickly, not without the appropriate caution of someone who has learned what trust costs, I met someone who treated honesty like a requirement rather than an option. People ask sometimes whether I hate Emily. The honest answer is no. Hate requires energy. Sustained, deliberate energy directed towards something that is no longer a presence in your life. She took enough of that already. What I feel now is something I did not expect to feel when I walked out of that restaurant. Something that arrived slowly over months of rebuilding and reflection. Gratitude. Because if she had not stood up that night and revealed, in front of 20 people who loved me, exactly who she was, I might have spent another 10 years believing a version of my life that was never real. The truth, when it arrives, does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it arrives in a restaurant in front of everyone you know. Sometimes the most important thing someone ever does for you is show you exactly who they are, so that you can finally choose something better. If this story moved you, if it made your chest tighten or your mind race or your gratitude for the genuinely honest people in your life deepen, like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications. We are here every single week with stories that are raw, real, and unapologetically human. And the next story, let's just say, this was only the beginning. I will see you there. Don't be late.